to the Good Old Football Podcast. Thanks to my friends Auto Magic for providing us with that beautiful intro music. I'm your host, Matt Edwards. Be sure to check out Auto Magic on Spotify and wherever you get your music at. This is the inaugural episode of the Good Old Football Podcast, doing an episode every Tuesday leading up to Super Bowl 54 in Miami this year. It's in Miami, airing on Fox this year, so you got to think Joe Buck and Troy Aikman will have the call. A couple other guys who are on Fox, at least in part of the country, or all over the internet for quite some time. A couple of years anyways. Me and Craig Smylie. Craig Smylie is my first guest on this podcast. Enjoyed chatting with him in Cleveland over the weekend. He spent about a little more than a decade, covering the Browns and the Steelers. He actually, before he was covering the Steelers, was in a job that allowed him to cover Ben Roethlisberger in high school. And he saw Ben Roethlisberger be a backup quarterback for 2 years in small town Ohio. So interesting stories. He's got so much interesting stuff to talk about. We could only get together for about half an hour. We could have went for about 4 or 5 hours, it felt like. But he's got good stuff on Big Ben. Antonio Brown, he was covering the Steelers, saw Antonio Brown go from a 6th-round pick to this superstar / possibly insane person we now know, who's willing to maybe sit out an entire season, leave $15 million on the table because he doesn't like his helmet. We can all relate to that, right? And also we'll talk about the Browns. He was one of many people who last year, when the reports came out, because remember, it was about a day, maybe even 2 days before the Browns drafted Baker Mayfield, that it was known. I think Adam Schefter came out and told people that Baker was going to be the guy, and I know a lot of Browns fans who were pretty furious about it, and you have to understand them coming from where they did. They were pretty much in a bad relationship for quite a number of years. Every decision the team made seemed to backfire, so understandably, with Baker's character issues, if you want to call them that, and him planting an Oklahoma flag in the middle of Ohio Stadium just a few months prior, weren't a lot of Baker Mayfield fans in Ohio, but that seemed to change in a hurry. So we'll talk about that. This is the first episode. The beginning of this recording between Craig and I, a little bit hollow, but I was messing with the audio as we went along and made it sound all right, so bear with me those first 2-3 minutes. We'll get through it. We're learning here, folks. I appreciate Craig coming on. This is the first episode. Going to be a lot of fun. Stick around, and hope you enjoy it. Episode 1 of the Good Old Football Podcast. Have fun. All right, Craig Smylie, back on the air together for the first time in, 5 years?
You would know the exact date.
The exact date would have been November of 2014, but I don't know the exact day. So almost 5 years.
Yeah, I would say that's about right. And you've done a lot with your life. I, on the other hand, not as much. I've done things, just not the same, not the ambitious, move to Cincinnati, move to Columbus, move to New York City.
Yeah, get all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing, I got to get it out of the way. Are you still a Browns fan, or did you bail last year?
I'm back on the Browns bandwagon.
You weren't alone.
I was, go ahead.
You weren't alone in when they drafted Baker saying you were done. A lot of people like to play the game that they've been aboard the whole time, but after failure, Manziel, Whedon, all that, a lot of people gave up.
I was one of them. I hated the pick, and I hated the Denzel Ward pick that followed. I could not have been more upset in the way of ready to throw, just break a collection of bobbleheads. I mean, people were worried about my health and well-being, and I'm the first one to tell you, although it's pointed out by many people, and yourself included, I was wrong. And not only was I wrong, and I know it's only a year in,
right? But
some things you just know, and you can just tell the difference between a guy that knows what he's doing and a guy that doesn't. And both of those guys know what they're doing. It's a matter of, for Ward, staying healthy. Now, I had thoughts of other guys that could have been positioned, in that draft. I would have liked to see Saquon Barkley go 1 and then a quarterback at 4. And looking back, they wouldn't have gotten a quarterback at 4 that I feel would have been good enough. I think you had Darnold go 3.
Yeah.
And Baker obviously went 1. I would assume he would have went. I don't know if he would have gone 2.
He had to go somewhere. But you're sold now. Like, you think he'll still be the guy in 8 years? Because I look back and I remember Vince Young, everyone was mad about. He's now getting DUIs in Texas and getting kicked out of UT. And Sam Bradford couldn't stay healthy. He was a beast his rookie year. But that's what has irritated me, because as you know, Like, I've been good with, even though I'm not a Browns fan, I've wanted to see them do better because I'm from Ohio and it'd be fun. But they go 7-8-1 last year, and they've got a Super Bowl parade they're ready to throw.
Absolutely, and I'm not ready to jump on that extent of the bandwagon. I don't believe in that, but it's less about Baker Mayfield and more about Freddie Kitchens.
You like Freddie that much?
No. I like him less.
Oh, okay.
Than I like. I'm sold on Baker Mayfield.
Right.
Again, you're not going to control if he has injury problems, and you're not going to control if this offensive line. They got rid of Kevin Zeitler, who was one of the key pieces, I think, on that.
Yeah,
line.
Their O line's not that great.
No, not at all. I mean, their O line is going to be. Needs to prove itself, I guess would be the. I don't want to go and say it's going to be terrible, but they've got a guy like Chris Hubbard who's one of their top guys, and the guy couldn't. He was a fill-in for Pittsburgh for 6 years. That'll be an interesting thing. The thing that concerns me personally is the head coach. I just don't think that you can overlook the inexperience where he's concerned. With Mayfield, I think we've seen enough to know, okay, the guy's for real, and he has a ton of weapons around him. Again, I'm worried about the things that somebody that would watch the team from an objective standpoint would be worried about, and that would be the inexperience of the coaching. Tackling, they were horrendous last year.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to Freddie, I think he probably got picked because John Dorsey wanted the guy he could.
Agreed. I think control. A lot of people think that.
Yeah.
And he's a Baker Mayfield guy, and Baker loves him. He's unique, but I think as you've gone along and watched some of the coaches, you've had the privilege of having Marvin Lewis be leading your favorite team forever and a day.
Yeah.
And probably knew a little bit about Hugh Jackson as far as what he was before he came to Cleveland. But, for the most part, the Browns have had guys that were pretty boring, to say the least. And a guy like Mangini, who's now, doing the television thing, but just real...
Yeah, Mike Pettin, Pat Shurmur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very rarely have you seen the personality. Pettin... on occasion had the personality.
But he was only there a year.
And most of them have been. When you're really, really bad, the interesting thing, and I think just from listening to the talk radio in Cleveland now since I've moved back, that was a big topic of conversation this year, today specifically on a Friday, was that a guy like Freddie Kitchens has all these weapons. We got Odell Beckham Jr. and Landry and Chubb, and the list goes on and on and on. Offensively, what happens if they go 6-10? Do you make another change as far as a coach is concerned, or do you stick with him again? Because all those other guys that came before Freddie Kitchens didn't have a ton of talent.
No,
this guy's got talent. There's no question about it. Now, again, like I said, there are question marks, but I feel like he is the biggest thing to watch this year, more than anything.
I was going to say literally, but yeah, that too.
Probably.
He is, I forget who it was, someone on Twitter made a joke that he is the Browns coach who most also looks like a Browns fan.
That's well played.
And that you could see him out there behind a grill during a tailgate.
Yeah, he's
with a Miller Lite. He's cool though. I like him.
I don't know what I think about him. He's certainly, he acts like he doesn't care what anybody thinks.
Mm-hmm. But it's easy to play that card when you're 0-0.
Right, it is easy to play that card when you're 0-0. But at the same time, he acts like it and claims to be playing that role. But then they get things like Bob Wiley, the big line coach, who comes out and says, "Oh, he wasn't even the guy behind any of their success," and immediately, Kitchens is just all over him. Immediately, he's just, "Oh, this guy doesn't know, and I wouldn't have put him on my staff." I mean, clearly, you either have to not care what people think and prove it, or you have to admit, okay, I care. And most people care.
Yeah.
Most people don't like bad things said about them. Most people don't like reading the nasty email. Most people don't like getting the mean voicemail.
You've had some mean voicemails in your day.
Numerous. And this guy, I think, is he's not as real when it comes to that. I think he's real with his emotions. He went off on Mary Kay Cabot, the Browns beat writer.
What do you go off on her about?
Oh, she asked a simple question about the plan for Odell Beckham Jr., whether it's I think the goal was to try to get out of Kitchens. Is there an injury, or is the way that they're handling him in the preseason precautionary this far, because he's been doing a lot of individual drills and no team drills, and they got him in they're scrimmaging in Indianapolis all week long, and then going with the preseason game at the week's end. And I think a lot of people are kind of just trying to judge as to what's real and what's for show. I think.
So what did he say to Mary Kay?
He said it's none of your business, basically, and I get that, and that's fine to answer that way. But I think that a lot of times, again, this is a guy that's goes two ends of the spectrum. He doesn't care what people are saying, and then all of a sudden, he cares what Bob Wiley has to say. But then he's going to say, if anybody leaks anything out, you're fired. And, I don't know. I like the fact that he's got attitude, but I just wish that it was consistent, because I think he's talking out two sides.
Mary Kay's outlasted a lot of Browns coaches.
Yeah,
so
she and Grossi both.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With Browns fans, am I wrong in thinking, because I always see the hatred towards Cowherd, who's on the TV behind us right now. Am I wrong in thinking Browns fans have been overly sensitive to any criticism they've got this year?
No, you're right. I think that's pretty accurate. I think, again, that they haven't had the chance to defend.
Right, they've never. It's like they're just it's like they're a second grader that got thrown into a fraternity house.
Yeah.
And are taking college exams.
That's a good analogy. I mean, I think that, again, it's the fact that the hype is so hyped that I don't even want to say most fans, I'd say the fans that you're referring to are, just going to that extreme of don't say anything bad about the Browns. They don't deserve it. This is the year. And I'm like, I'm more guarded.
Yeah.
Jaguars
thought 17 months ago, when they were a play away from the Super Bowl, that next year was going to be their year.
Yeah. And again,
there's examples like that everywhere,
all over the place. And it could have been their year had they gone about it the right way. I feel like Cleveland's in a better position than they've been in a long, long time. And I think that most people would.
It's hard to be in a worse position.
But it's true. But I mean, again, they blew some games last year
that they could have won.
They could have won. Yeah. And they also won a couple that they could have lost. And you're going to have that every year as well. They got a really tough schedule this year. Especially early.
Yeah.
So I think that you'll see those Browns fans that you're referring to panic if they're 4-4. And I wouldn't be so quick to panic if they're 4-4, because those first 8 specifically are brutal. And I think that
you go 4-4 to start and finish 6-2, which is you're 10-6, you're probably in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you got a situation with, Kareem Hunt down the line. You got Antonio Callaway, who's now been suspended.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They got some characters there.
Yeah. But they always have
a lot of personality.
They do, but I think the depth is deeper than the average person that, may not follow the team is looking. I think a guy like Rashard Higgins is going to be a really good football player.
He should be, with the attention Jarvis and OBJ take.
Absolutely. Now, if assuming Beckham can stay on the field and stay healthy, both of those guys. But then you look at the tight end, and Njoku is a physical specimen. Right. Chubb at the running back position. That's one of those spots where I wouldn't be surprised to see if they make a move, especially once the roster cuts happen, to get somebody, who's more of a veteran presence.
Speaking of which, did you happen to see Adrian Peterson just ripping off runs last night against the Bengals?
I didn't see it.
Just looks phenomenal. And he's 57 years old.
He's again a physical specimen who can play. I just think, again, his workload needs to be limited. If his workload is limited, he'll have
AP?
more success.
Yeah, he plays for the Redskins, so they'll find a way to screw it up. Let's talk. So how long were you in Erie, Pennsylvania?
11 and a half years. August 19th, 2007 to February 15th, 2019.
And over the past 5 years, you've been at pretty much every, well, it would be more than that. 7 years maybe you've been at pretty much every Steelers home game?
Yeah, I'd say probably almost like 9 years, probably more like in the 8 to 9 year range. I mean, we started doing the Steelers consistently because of the sponsorships.
Oh, yeah.
It was just one of those things where the
Black
Steelers,
and Gold Nation.
Right, exactly. So
from Coors Light.
Yeah, and that changed. I mean, there were plenty of different beer guys jumping all over that, but being in that niche market that's located between Cleveland, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh, like in the middle of a triangle, we had fans from those markets for sure. Those different, Bills fans, Browns fans, Steelers fans. I'd say Steelers the most, and
for
then
sure,
Browns, and then the Bills. But we would, if the Steelers were home, we were there. It'll be interesting to see how that market handles it with what I'm going to assume that there's going to be a downswing in Pittsburgh, especially once Ben Roethlisberger decides to hang them up.
I still think Pittsburgh, by the way, wins the division this year.
Yeah.
And I think Cleveland will be the only competition because I think both, not that it really matters. Cincinnati, best case is 8-8. Baltimore, if you're down in the fourth quarter, Lamar Jackson's not winning you a game. Based on what I've seen. I want to go back to Pittsburgh, though. I want to get your best during that time, favorite, most outrageous thing that happened while you were down there at training camp. I know there was a James Harrison thing that one time. What you got for me? I was thinking about that yesterday out of all the years, because you think of the little outrageous things you just hear about on Twitter from time to time from beat writers.
Yeah, I mean, again, last year for training camp, watching Antonio Brown come in a helicopter was one of a kind, and it was... The process of what that was just started to quietly leak out early in the morning as to what was happening. And we all knew that he was going to make a scene of things.
I don't think I ever talked to him during the games I was there, because I was probably there for 4 or 5 games.
He's strange. And I've thought, like, I interviewed one of my first interactions with Antonio Brown was probably around that 2000... maybe like 2013. And it was the Edinburgh Sports Auction. So they have, every 2 years, they have an auction to raise money for Edinburgh University.
And that would have been kind of when he was starting to break out and was popular in Pittsburgh, but didn't have like that top 5 or even top 10 status.
Right, and he wasn't, the line that I always draw, Matt, is the Dancing with the Stars line. Is that when Antonio Brown went on Dancing with the Stars, he became this social media freak. He became this pop phenomenon from that show just because it draws from a different pool. And I honestly believe that was when his attitude changed. I've posted numerous times on Twitter a video that ESPN did where Antonio Brown was, again, younger in his career, and he had a breakout couple seasons already. And there was a video of he had said something along the lines of, anyone who can't make it to training camp or comes to training camp but I don't have a chance to sign an autograph, mail me something to me, to camp, to Latrobe. I'll sign it and send it back. And he was getting, thousands of things mailed to him at training camp. And one of the angle that ESPN took in this feature piece was that one of this former military man who was living in Hawaii sent him a letter, saying how he's such a great role model and all of these things, and he included some sort of Medal of Honor that he was giving to Antonio Brown
to keep.
And the way that Antonio Brown was reacting to everything that was happening was genuine. It was a love for the game of football. It was a love for the fans. That's gone. And if you watch that back then, if you find that piece that ESPN did, and again, it was probably in that neighborhood of when I was talking to him, you would notice a totally different person. And some people say, oh, he's in the early stages of CTE, and some people, I'm drawn to that specific time period of the Dancing with the Stars thing because I think it made him bigger than football in his mind. And that was when all of a sudden all these things started. So I go back and I think of when, oddly enough, Ryan Clark and Antonio Brown were the two guests at this auction. And I interviewed Ryan Clark, who's one of the best interviews I've ever done in my entire life. Just a great guy, and he's now an analyst, obviously, for that network. And I interviewed Ryan Clark one-on-one, and then the next sports segment I was going to interview Antonio Brown, and there were it was the part where a bunch of the sponsors were coming in and getting autographs. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to pull him away from the sponsors. I said, Ryan, why don't you sit down, you interview Antonio, and we'll run that live. And then they did that, and then they did a tape segment for our Friday Night Lights show. It was priceless stuff, and the ironic thing now is that those two butt heads because Ryan Clark can't stand the guy, and it works both ways. That stands out. I remember jumping over, like field fence to get onto the field after they beat the Jets in the AFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl because the security was trying to keep everybody off the field, and we kind of just said,
"You broke the law."
Yeah, I fought the law and won with the help of Kent Urbanski, who's the veteran of it. But the James Harrison story that you're talking about was training camp. James Harrison had just gone through all of the suspensions for I'm lost at what they were now.
I don't remember what they were either.
But he was fined for hits and fined for this and suspended for something or other. But he had just come back, and he is not the friendliest by any stretch of the imagination. And he was walking up the hill in Latrobe, and little did we know we weren't allowed as of that year to do interviews walking up the hill anymore, which we had done forever. And it's kind of like there's a huge hill from the practice fields to where they work out and where they eat lunch. So I was just walking and talking to James Harrison. I did a whole interview backpedaling up a hill with this very intimidating dude, only to be chased down by the Steelers PR people being like, you can't do that. So that stands out. And then actually when he came back to Pittsburgh after the year in Cincinnati, his first home game, he ran out of the tunnel to a great ovation. They lost the game, and I went in to the locker room afterwards and asked him what it was like when he ran through the tunnel and got that ovation. And he went off on me about how dare I ask him that question after they lost, and do I think that he wants to have that conversation. So I've seen both sides of James because, again, he came back after to one of the alumni events maybe a year ago, and I had a great one-on-one interview with him, and he was so nice. But he's definitely one of those guys you got to catch him at the right moment. So a lot of the stories revolve around him, and Hines Ward stands out as well. Just being a guy.
Hines was there. I wasn't there when Hines was there, and that's another one. Roethlisberger and Hines Ward, no secret, did not like each other. And I think that's a reason why Pittsburgh's going to be good this year. I mean, Ben's got to be so happy not to deal because he's had to deal with Le'Veon, Antonio, Hines. But anyways, going about Hines.
Yeah, no, I know you may be right, but the weapons have to be there. And I mean,
but they've always figured it out at receiver.
They have, but I just don't trust the guys that they have. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster's phenomenal player.
James Washington's looked good so far.
Yeah, he's looked good.
Darius Hayward-Bay, not a bad third option.
Yeah, but even James Washington, his skill set as a rookie was very, very limited. And you saw his potential. I can't wait to see, if he's in fact grown leaps and bounds, because they need him to. I mean, he's got to be the two. Hayward-Bay, again, he still has something left. But, in addition to that, they lost Jesse James. They've got Vance McDonald still. But a lot of those guys, have had injuries, and that's going to plague anybody. But it's going to be interesting to watch. And again, I've known James Conner since he's a freshman in high school.
Yeah, I want to get to... Tell me the Hines story first. Okay, I want to get to James. I don't want to forget it.
Yeah. With Hines, it was just more of the fact that that's a dude, and there are a handful of them that, a guy like Antonio Brown would answer 5 questions and he's bolting. Hines Ward would wait for every reporter to leave the locker room. He wouldn't stop talking. And it was... one of a kind. There are very few that are like him. Ramon Foster is like that. A couple others, but Hines, for the type of player that he was, hard nosed on the field, was a teddy bear off of it, as far as just being one of those guys that was very good to deal with. And Cam Hayward is like that now. He's not going to duck anybody. He'll wait, if 17 people are in the very back of the scrum and those next 17 want to come up and ask him the same 20 questions, he'll give you the same answers. And it sounds like you're hearing it for the first time. So,
Cam did an interview with me when I was a senior in college, because he was a year ahead of me.
Sure.
At Ohio State, or 2 years maybe. I feel like he should be older. He's a guy who looks older than he is, though. But yeah, he's Roethlisberger, never the friendliest toward me. Mm-hmm. Do you ever have any, just the typical kind of, has no desire to talk to anyone?
Yeah, not as much anymore. But when I worked in Lima,
Lima, was he a high school there? In high school,
he went to Ada, which is now I said Ada. I lied. He went to Findlay, which is really close to Ada, which is where footballs are made.
Yeah.
And then he went to Miami of Ohio, which is whatever. That's a whole different story for a different time. But Ben was actually played behind another kid at quarterback for like the first, I want to say, at least 2 years of high school. The quarterback that he was behind was the mayor's son. So that was typical
straight and narrow,
politics, right? And
what's that guy doing now? He's probably
working at a pizza joint.
Yeah,
no, I don't know. They're
smoking cigarettes while he tosses dough.
They're buddies. Iritti is his last name, Iriti. But so Ben was gone. Ben graduated high school. I want to say a year before. I think it was a '99 graduate. So he was a year before, ahead of me in high school, and then was in college. But his younger sister, Carly, who ended up playing basketball at University of Oklahoma, or Oklahoma University, whatever they call it, she was a volleyball and basketball star at Findlay. And when I was working in that market, Carly was playing basketball and volleyball. And this was right... I want to say this was shortly before the Ben Roethlisberger motorcycle accident situation.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so he came... Somebody tipped us off that he was going to be at this tournament. It was whenever it was had to be like springtime. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was, or fall. And he was...
or summer or winter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter when it was.
Whenever it had to be when he was out of season or he was on a bye week, so whatever. But nonetheless, somebody tipped us off that he was going to be there. It was myself and Ryan Fowler, who worked for the competition and went on to be one of the lead fantasy football writers for, I think, Yahoo and Fox Sports. But he was with me, and Roethlisberger is in the stands, and I'm gonna just walk up to him, while this volleyball tournament's going on. But it was like, it wasn't just two teams playing. It was like,
And at this point, he's got a Super Bowl ring and he's established.
I believe
so it would have been after 05.
Yeah, for sure was after 05. And I walked up to him and was like, "Hey Ben, I don't want to bother you. I get that you're watching Carly play, but there are a couple of us from the media who are here. When you get a minute, can we talk to you for a couple?" And he's like, yeah, I'll get you after this match. And we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited, and he never moved. And then all of a sudden he tries to sneak out of the high school, and we have probably been in that high school more than he had, and trapped him. And I said, "Hey man, we just want a couple minutes of your time." And he literally looks me right in the eyes and says, "You've got 30 seconds. Go. I'm counting." And
nice guy.
No, not at all. But, we got him talking, and he let it go to the point where we did probably a 5-minute interview with him. And as we were leaving, I'll never forget it. I was walking out the door. It was just me and Ben and like whoever he was with, like one other person. And he was like, he turns and he goes, "Hey man, thanks for your time." After being such a...
Wait, Ben said that to you?
Yes. And then he jumps on a motorcycle and leaves. I'm not even kidding.
Strange guy. All right, I know you got to get out of here. We talked about people, James Conner, which, by the way, when I got to Erie, he still wasn't at Pitt, but it was the two kids from prep who were going to Michigan State,
Sure.
And people kind of thought, especially Damian Terry was like, had a lot of NFL hope, and little did we know that James Conner now, one of the best backs in the league.
Absolutely. And James wasn't even the starter until his senior year because it was a kid that was...
And he was recruited as a defensive end.
Right. He was recruited as a defensive end to Pitt. That's the only reason he went to Pitt, is that he had offers, maybe 2 other offers. I want to say Toledo and like Central Michigan were the only 3 D1 offers that he had.
Unreal.
And Russell Shell, who was the running back a year ahead of him out of like Hopewell or somewhere in the Pittsburgh area.
He transferred from WVU, right?
To WVU.
To WVU.
Yeah, so as soon as that happened, he went all over the place, because then he ended up, I want to say, maybe at USC even for a year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But when Russell Shell left, they were screwed. Pitt went and said, "Okay, James, what do you think about playing running back?" And that dude hadn't played running back. I mean, he played growing up, but at varsity level, there was a kid named Greg Garman who was all everything and being recruited, by University of Iowa. And, James went and just became the dude that nobody knew anything about. And all of a sudden, he's having a huge season at Pitt. He played his first game. You were at his first game. They were playing Florida State.
Yeah.
Against Jameis Winston.
Right.
It was a primetime game,
right.
Maybe a Friday night.
I forget. It was on ESPN. I forget the night, though. It might have been. I think it was a Monday night game.
Okay.
Because it was, I remember, because they were talking about, they had like Jameis Winston in the intro being like, Monday Night Football doesn't get any better than this. Right. Because it was the first Monday night game on Heinz Field, not involving the Steelers. So it was
pretty crazy. And so then he just tore it up from there. He went and had a really good freshman year. MVP of the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl against Bowling Green, and that was in Michigan. He came back that night. After doing that, I think it was the next night, and was on the air with us, live in studio. And we kind of just watched him grow up. I was with him, as he battled through cancer, and back after that, followed him to New York City when they played in the Pinstripe Bowl as a senior. Was he a senior or was he a junior? I can't remember. No, he had to be a senior because he missed the year.
Yeah, he set out 2016, I think.
Yeah, so he would have been
came
a
back 2017.
Redshirt junior, I think he would have been when he left. But and I was with him the night he got drafted by the Steelers, and just a class dude. Just a class act, and he's the real deal. And I said to him from the get-go, just stay healthy, get through the first contract, sign your second contract, and then do whatever else from there. The less he has to play, the better his chances are. And unfortunately for James, he's the dude now, no matter what. It'll be interesting. The health thing has always been an issue for him. But he's starting to become more durable to what Mike Tomlin would refer to as the soft tissue injuries. Those things would kill him in college. Every single tough run, he'd get up limping. It's like watching LeBron James play basketball. You just can't, you can't tell if it's for real or not. But he's working out tons and tons. He's in probably the best shape he's ever been in, and it's good to see. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's the best. And I remember, I've talked to him a bunch too, and he was good head on his shoulder. So I'm happy to see him. As much as you and a lot of others know, don't like to root for the Steelers. I'm always rooting for him to do well. All right, man, we could sit here and talk forever, but we both got things to do. So, anything else?
No, thanks for having me on. Great to see you.
You're my first guest.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Follow him on Twitter, @CraigSmylie. Yeah, week 1 from Cleveland. Home of your Super Bowl champion Cleveland Browns. All right.
Time will tell.
Thanks, Craig. All right, Craig Smylie on episode 1, the inaugural Good Old Football podcast. Appreciate him chiming in. Sorry if you kept hearing his fist pound the table at the hotel as he was making points. He's a passionate guy. If you want to let him know about it or anything else, you can check him out on Twitter at Craig Smylie. That's Smylie. And yes, that is his actual last name. A lot of people question that during our broadcast careers. It's the real deal. I am at Matt Edwards on Twitter and at Good Old Matthew on Instagram. If you want to check anything out, say anything, chime in on the show, share a story, whatever you want to do, we'll put it on the show if it's good. Appreciate everyone tuning in. We will be back next week with episode 2 of the Good Old Football Podcast. Thanks for stopping by.